want to start this evening by answering a few questions from the question board written today. Some of them were based on the talk that I gave this afternoon. This question is it okay to meditate with open eyes sometimes to avoid too many thoughts? Yes, it's okay to do that. Normally, in Theravada or Vipassana meditation or even practicing Shamatha meditation, usually people are recommended to gently, close the eyes, to meditate with the closed eyes, because the eye is one of the strongest senses. And we crave to see things. Probably more than any other sense, people would rather, have their eyesight and be defective maybe in some other sense, in other words, but, the craving to see. And it's interesting that the word I, the E-Y-E, and I for the ego, the same pronunciation, right? I. And I think there's a connection there. And because it's the I that gives us our identity, and seeing and comparing and judging things, other people back to ourselves and so on. But anyway, so the eye is one of the strongest senses. So if you're meditating and your eyes are open and a tarantula crawls along the floor and you see that, then you might get excited by that, or a snake. So, but if your eyes are closed, then you may not see that, and it wouldn't distract you. So anyway, and meditation primarily isn't focus inside. So there's no point really to look outside, when you're meditating. Now, of course, in Zen, if you go to a Zen temple, some places, they make you keep the eyes open. And if you close the eyes, they come back and jab you with a stick. So, so these are just different, traditions. But if you're sleepy, it's good to open the eyes. So if you have trouble with sleepiness, if you keep the eyes open a little bit and just allow some light to come in, that hopefully kind of stimulates the brain to stay more alert. So you can open the eyes, but you don't look through the eyes. So you just let the eyes kind of go up, but to avoid purposely trying to look at something through the eyes. So it takes some training to do that. But if you can do that, then it will help you. Whereas, there's no absolute do's or don'ts, in meditation. Some teachers say, you have to sit like this with your legs like this, or you have to keep your eyes open, or you have to, these are, of course, recommendations, and perhaps there's useful things about them, but people are different, and it's basically, how does it help you? Whether you keep your hands like this and your thumbs touching together, or you keep your, hands like this, or you keep them down like this, or you keep your eyes open or not, or if you sit slouching or you sit straight. How does it help you? How does it help to improve your meditation? This should always be the criterion in terms of what you might be doing in a meditation. So, you can try opening the eyes, and if that helps you to have less thoughts, then okay, you can use it for a while. But at some point, if you find it distracting, you can try closing the eyes again. Now, if you have a real good concentration, let's say you've been, with the eyes closed, and you developed a very deep state of concentration and awareness. Then if you open the eyes, there's no desire going out of the eyes, because you've already reached a state of concentration, which is basically beyond desire, where desires have ceased and the mind becomes concentrated. So then if you open the eyes, there's not going to be anything going out of the eye or desire. So the eyes open, but there's no energy going out, so a sense of emptiness can be experienced. Because the eye is open, but normally our energy is going out of the eye because of the craving to see. But when that's withdrawn, there's no eye going out the eye, so emptiness, a more strong sense of emptiness can arise. So, but that's only if you've already reached a good level of concentration. So these are all just things that you can experiment with and see, what the benefit of the different ways is. So today I talked about the foundations of mindfulness. This question is, if mindfulness of the body is one of the 4 foundations of mindfulness, what are the other 3, and how do they work together? So how many people have heard or read about the 4 foundations of mindfulness? Just raise your hand. So some of you haven't. Anyway, it's the Buddha's primary teaching about meditation, especially about mindfulness and vipassana meditation, but meditation in general. And for developing wisdom. And so it's mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the feelings, mindfulness of the mind, and mindfulness of the subtle dhammas. So these 4 foundations of mindfulness cover virtually every type of body-mind experience that you could possibly have. And it also, the 4th foundation of mindfulness, contemplation of the Dhamma, is sort of the final goal or the climax of those 4 foundations of mindfulness. I'm not going to go into it in detail, but I'll just kind of briefly go over it, because it really is the foundation of all teachings of Vipassana meditation and mindfulness meditation have their source in those 4 foundations of mindfulness. So we talked about mindfulness of the body. So the mind resides within this body, basically, and it's the mind and the senses of this body have the contact with the world. So this body is the doorway for the world, the entryway for the world, visible objects, sounds, smells, tastes, the skin, and then we think about all those things. So anyway, we use mindfulness of breathing, as I mentioned today, to develop initial concentration and bring the attention to the body. But once the mind has been reconnected to the body and focused in the body, then the body itself becomes an exploration, and you allow the awareness to permeate deeper into the body, to feel the subtle sensations, and to feel how the body is just a mass of changing sensations and vibrations, and also learning how to observe pleasant and painful sensations. But anyway, so the body is the starting point that you have to get centered and focused in. And then the feelings, so the Vedanusati, or the contemplation of feelings. That means the painful and pleasant feelings that are coming through not only the body, but there's pleasant and painful feelings coming from what you see and what you hear and what you smell and what you taste and even your thoughts. So there's actually, the contemplation of feelings, there's called the 6 times 3. There's pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings that you experience from the body. There's pleasant, painful, and neutral feelings you experience through the eye, through the ear, the rest of the senses. So there's 18 ranges of feelings in total. Because, there's painful sounds that you hear, there's pleasant sounds that you hear, and there's neutral sounds that you hear and smell and see and feel. And these affect our actions. Everything is triggered off by sensations, what I mentioned in my talk today. So, so that's how they work. If the sensations are coming through the body, that's why you have to get grounded and centered in the body first in order to clearly see them, and to see them when they're initially arising, and to observe how they affect your mind and how they trigger off your thoughts. And to develop equanimity toward the feelings, that you're no longer craving the pleasant feelings and you're no longer pushing away the painful feelings, because this is what we react to all the time. We react out of greed for pleasurable feelings, we react with anger or hatred for painful feelings. So the mind is constantly going back and forth between this pleasant and what I call the pleasure-pain syndrome, and caught in a struggle between that. So the contemplation of feelings helps you to understand that, these feelings are just like bubbles that come. If you pay attention to them, they appear to be real, but if you don't pay attention to them, then they just arise and vanish very quickly and don't really affect you. So that's how we have to contemplate these feelings. So the second foundation of mindfulness is the Vedanusati, contemplation of feelings. And once you've developed equanimity toward the feelings, you're no longer trying to scratch that itch or, even get away from the pain. You learn to endure them and just let them be. See how they're constantly changing, they're no big deal. Then you can clearly see the mind's reactions. You can see how the mind, all your thoughts and emotions are triggered off by these sensations. So there's a connection to all these things. Body, sensations, and thoughts. Like you notice when greed is in the mind, you recognize greed is in the mind. Or if anger is in the mind, you recognize anger is in the mind. Or if sadness is in the mind, you recognize sadness is in the mind. Or if happiness is in the mind, you recognize happiness is in the mind. And so you just objectively learn to identify whatever mental state is arising, but you don't cling to it as me or I. You just say, this is a bubble of greed, a bubble of anger, a bubble of sadness, a bubble of happiness. So what? If you don't identify with it, the bubble bursts, just like poking a pin in a water bubble, right? Poof. It's nothing, right? A water bubble. Those soap bubbles you blew as a child? Poke it with a pin. Where did it go? It looks real when it's floating there, but when it pops, nothing. So all of our thoughts have no more substance than a water bubble. The Buddha actually gave this simile to our feelings and perceptions, like just being like that. So that's the way we try to observe and contemplate our thoughts, and even emotion. Depression, sadness. The whole gamut of thoughts are just thought bubbles. But we identify, that's me, that's my sadness. I am sad because this or that happened. So that's the identity. Whenever you own something, that's when it becomes suffering. When you develop this detached awareness to it and just see everything as just bubbles and don't identify you as the owner or is it happening to you, that cuts off the reaction to it. And that's how we have to develop the contemplation. And that's the Buddha's instruction on how to deal with feelings, and to deal with thoughts. You see them all as anicca, impermanent, not me, not mine, and not myself. They're just conditioned phenomena. They're just conditioned bubbles. But we've identified with them so long in our life, it's very, very difficult for the mind to let go of them. That's why this is a very radical type of, mental therapy. Anyway, the last one is the contemplation of Dhamma. So we have contemplation of the body, contemplation of feelings, contemplation of the mind states and thoughts. And then the Dhamma is the last category. It's a little bit more complex. And it actually comprises the Dhamma teachings of the Buddha. So it has you contemplating the 5 hindrances. It's the first, there's 5 or 6 groups of Dhamma contemplation. First is to recognize what are the 5 hindrances. So when sensual desire arises in the mind, you identify, this is sensual desire. And you know how sensual desire arises. And you know how it persists in your mind because of the attachment and identification to it. And you know how it ceases. When you stop identifying with it, it ceases. In the same way with ill will. When thoughts of ill will or resentment arise in the mind, you just identify, ill will is in the mind now. And you know how ill will arises because you're clinging and identifying with it. That person insulted me. I don't like him. You're clinging to that idea, right? So that's how it persists. But how it ceases is when you stop identifying that. And then the restlessness and worry. The mind is worrying and restless. Restlessness is in the mind now. You understand how restlessness arises. You know how it persists. And you know how it will cease and to cease existing in the future. These are all very, very important parts of the understanding how they arise and how they persist and how they can cease through the practice. And then the same with sloth and torpor and doubts. So anyway, you contemplate the dhammas of the 5 hindrances. While you're contemplating them, they cease. And then the mind gets more concentrated. And then the 5 aggregates is the next group. You contemplate this body and mind is just the 5 aggregates of form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. And so you examine what is form, what is this body? It's just the 4 elements of earth, fire, water, and air. And you understand how this body has come to be because of the past karma, and so on. The seed of the past consciousness coming to birth again. You understand how the body ceases at the time of death, and how it ceases to grow again in the future by attaining enlightenment. So this is contemplating the nature of the body. And then the feelings, we already talked about those. Those are the same feelings I just talked about before. Pleasant, painful, neutral feelings. And then the perceptions, the way the mind pictures objects, creates objects out of just vibrations. This is very interesting, actually. The 5 aggregates is is the main topic of Vipassana meditation. A lot of people don't understand it though. And the perceptions, basically, a perception is the way the mind creates a mental image out of just a vibration. For example, if your eyes are closed and you hear a sound, that sound coming through the ear is a sound vibration, right? But what pops into your mind? The teacher talking, a door slamming, a car going up the driveway. These are mental pictures or thoughts that pop into your mind because of sounds, right? But it's just a sound vibration. So out of habit and out of learning language since we were a child, the brain automatically does this, of course. There's no harm in that. But we understand how these perceptions arise, that it's the mind that's creating some image out of just a sound vibration, or a visible vibration, or a smell vibration. And then we get attached to those perceptions, and then they cause us suffering. So understanding the nature of perception is also very important for understanding the mind and also for understanding liberation, how we can become liberated from the clinging to these perceptions. And then the volitional formations. We talked about those the other day in what question we had about that. That means the reactions to the perceptions. So all these 5 aggregates, basically, they're the body-mind process. So we have the body, and you also have sounds as part of the aggregate of rupa, khandha. So a sound vibration touches the ear, it produces a feeling. And because of that sound vibration, the mind creates the mental image of, oh, that's a fly walking on my face. And then we react to it. I don't like it. That's a volitional formation. It's a reaction that the body and mind takes based on the perception. If you see a snake, So these are volitional formations, the reactions that we take. Reactions of greed for pleasurable feeling and the reaction of anger or aversion for painful feeling. And then the last one is consciousness. The ego consciousness. These things are happening to me. We cling to that vijnana as I or me or mine. And so all of those together is called the person pack. How the person, the idea of a person with all of its memory and everything has come to be because of the clinging to the 5 aggregates. So it's a very powerful meditation, actually. That's why people don't like to touch it too much, because it's threatening for their egos. But it's the way to liberation. Anyway, so the 5 aggregates is the second Dhamma contemplation. Then the 6 senses. You examine the 6 senses. On this body there are 6 senses. Eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and mind. And they're constantly being impinged, and the mind is reacting to them. But that's all there is. The Buddha gave a beautiful discourse called the All. He said, monks, I'm going to teach you the All. You go, oh, really? Okay, we're all ears. He says, what is the All? It's the eye, visible objects and seeing. It's the ear, sounds and hearing. It's the nose, smells and smelling. It's the tongue, tastes and tasting. It's the body, feelings and feeling. And the mind objects and thinking. And that's all there is. There's no I or me in that. It's just a process that happens by itself. That's the way you contemplate the sixfold sense sphere, to see how it's empty of any owner or controller, because these things happen by themselves. You're not asking them to happen. You're not asking a sound to come to your ear, are you? No, it comes by itself. And you're not asking the hearing to happen, it happens by itself. And so this is the way that we contemplate the sixfold senses, to see especially the emptiness of the self. And then by the time you've done all these different contemplations, you've built up a very, very strong degree of concentration, mindfulness, and wisdom. So the fourth contemplation, or is that the fifth one? Let me see. Hindrances, aggregates, sixfold sense, base. This is just five, okay. The fourth one is the 7 factors of enlightenment. And because you've already been practicing all these previous stages, by the time you've reached that level, your concentration is very, very strong. And then your mindfulness is up. The mindfulness factor enlightenment is developed in you. The mindfulness factor of investigation is developed in you. The mindfulness factor of energy, happiness, concentration, and equanimity is developed or maybe not developed. So you contemplate those. And then the last one, the last category of contemplation of the Dhamma, of the whole foundation, 4 foundations of mindfulness, is the granddaddy, the 4 noble truths. Because by that time, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom has developed to the point that the mind understands, this is suffering, this is the cause of suffering, this is the cessation of suffering, this is the path leading to the cessation of suffering, and at any point after that, enlightenment can happen, entering the stream. So all these things are tied together, and they form a gradual progression. And the Buddha explained it so beautifully. He's the only person in existence that really could explain that process of the mind in such wonderful and perfect detail. The development of how to defeat Mara, how to overcome ignorance, and to liberate the mind from delusion. So that's how they work together. And so, they were given in that order, although some people say, oh, I just practice mindfulness of feeling. Oh, I just practice mindfulness of the mind. You can't really do it that way. I mean, you can, but it's, you got to, because the body is what leads to the feelings. Getting grounded in feelings leads you directly to the mind. So there is an order and progression. So this question, how do we use body sensations that come from strong emotions? So our sensations trigger off our thoughts, but our thoughts also trigger off body sensations. It's like in dreams, you can have a thought of some lustful thought and it'll trigger off some, body sensations or something like that. Or just thinking some angry thoughts about somebody can cause your stomach to churn or the body heat up. So our mind affects the body, it triggers off sensations, but sensations also by themselves trigger off our thoughts, and see how those are connected. Almost every thought is connected to a sensation in one way or another, or a feeling. That's why when you notice anger arising in the mind, normally when you have anger arising, what do? You focus on the object of your anger. That person insulted me. and you identify with it, and you build it up, and it keeps building up until you blow up. Instead, in mindfulness meditation, we don't focus on the anger, focus on the sensation the anger is creating. And so when you're focusing just on the sensation of heat or tension, or your jaws are clenched, you're no longer paying attention to the object that caused it. You're just focusing on the sensation. So when you separate the cause of the sensation from the sensation ceases. Or the thought about it ceases. This is very, very interesting. And this is really a very important part of training and understanding the mind. That normally we identify with the greed. You see an object of desire. And as long as you're focusing on the object, you keep recreating the desire. But instead, you try to locate the sensation that's connected with the desire, or the anger, or the sadness, or whatever it is. And so now you're just focusing on a sensation. And you stop identifying it with what caused it. And therefore, that you forget about the object. And when you forget about the object, the sensation also ceases. It's very, very interesting. But this is called investigation of Dhamma. This is how we use the Dhamma to investigate. That's the purpose of investigation, is to understand how things are arising and how things are gripping our mind, and how we use this high technology of the Buddha's teaching of meditation to undo that, condition. It's very, very interesting and very important. Unfortunately, most people don't get to that level. But that's the Buddha's very instructions, and you can read it in the Four Foundations of Mindfulness very, very clearly. Anyway, so it says, please explain the difference between Kaya Anupasana and Veda Anupasana. Okay, I think I already explained that. Can you give more details for how a person